Hello everyone and welcome to the Game Engine programming series. I'm going to write a game engine from scratch and I thought it would be a good idea if I'd record everything I do in videos and share them online, and by doing so create an online resource for people with the same interest in low-level game engine programming. Hopefully these videos will be useful to you and more importantly they'll be enjoyable to watch. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, let me start by describing the general architecture of the game engine as I plan to implement. The game engine itself is a static library written in C++, and it will provide all the functionality that's needed to run a game. Of course, a library alone is not enough to create a game with. For that we need a level editor, which I'm going to write in C# and WPF. The reason that I'm using C# instead of C++ is that creating a user interface in WPF is much easier and less time consuming than it would be in C++. But the way I am planning to set up this project is that the engine will be completely independent of the level editor. So if you are going to follow along with me, you can choose whatever framework works for you. For example, Qt or STL or any other framework that you feel comfortable with if C# and WPF are not your thing. For me, because I'm using two different frameworks, I need a DLL, a dynamic link library, to facilitate the communication between the two. And of course there is also the game code that we need to write in C++, which is basically scripts that we can attach to our game objects when we are making the game in the level editor. So that's pretty much all the parts of the game engine as the project. And concerning the videos, I think it's a good idea to color code each episode so people can see on what part I will be working in that particular video. So because we are more oriented towards low-level game engine programming, I consider those to be the more important videos for people who are interested in game engine programming. So I'll color code those videos red whenever I'm working on a game engine site, and those are must-watch videos for game engine programmers. And whenever I'm working on the DLL and level editor side, those will be the green episodes. And those are recommended if you really want to understand everything about this game engine, including the level editor. But sometimes I also need to do some unrelated stuff that's totally not interesting to game engine programmers. For example, defining the look and feel of the user interface elements like a button or a particular WPF control. And those are blue episodes which you can feel free to skip. And those will only be interesting to people who are also user interface developers. And I'll record them and put them out there just for the sake of completeness, but they are skippable. So this concludes describing the way I'll set up this project and the videos. Next, I'll set up Visual Studio so I can start programming. Okay, I've got Visual Studio started here and I'm ready to set up the project. The first project that I'm going to create is the static library for the game engine. I'll call the project engine because it's just one project within the solution. And the solution name is the name of our game engine, which I chose to be Frummel. Frummel doesn't exist in the form of a game engine, and it's easy to type, so that's why I chose this name. Now Visual Studio created a bunch of default files for us that I'm not going to use. I'll just leave them there for now, so I can go ahead and create our next project, which is for the editor. That one is a WPF project. .NET Core application, and the project name is the Frummel editor. Now, one thing I noticed is that Visual Studio picked the wrong target platform for me. I would like to have x64 as my target platform. And I'm going to remove the other platforms that I'm not going to use, so everything is nice and clear. And that I can do in the configuration manager. I can go to active solution platform and edit. And here I can delete the other platforms that I don't need. Now, all we are left with is the x64 platform. And that's good. Now I can try and build my project. Before doing so, I'm going to set this Frummel editor as my default startup project, because obviously we can't run a static library. Here I'm going to check the output directory, and I see that the engine library is built here, but I don't see the editor. And the reason is that the editor has its own output folder, of course. Since I'm going to use the engine library and the DLLs that I'm going to create later on with the level editor, it would be nice if everything was output in the same directory. So I can change that here in the properties of Frummel editor. Here is an option for setting an output path. I can set the output path for the debug build to the debug folder for the engine. And of course, set the target platform here as well. And do the same for release builds. Build again and check where it is, if the editor is now here as well. So I see that the folder which contains the editor is now in the output folder of game engine itself as well, but they are still not in the same directory. The reason is that Visual Studio appends the target platform name to this output path that we gave it here. But there is no other option for me here to set to prevent Visual Studio from doing this. But still I can make these files be output here by manually editing the project file of the Frummel editor. Here we have the options for the project, and there is an option I can set to prevent appending this name to the output path. So this is an option that I can set to false, and when I do this, Visual Studio won't append this name to the output path anymore. So save this. And build again. Now I can see that everything is output here. I can delete the old one and we are good to go. So one more thing I would like to do is to make Visual Studio pick the editor project as the default startup. Of course, I can always set it by right-clicking on it and setting it up as startup project. But whenever you want to open the solution on another machine, you have to repeat this step. One way to prevent that is to just go here in the Frummel solution file. I see two projects here, one for the game engine and one for the editor. And if I would put this one as the first project, then Visual Studio would take this automatically as the startup project. So we don't have to set it every time we open the solution on another machine. Okay, now we are ready to start coding, and the first thing I would like to do is to show you what I want the editor to do whenever I start the editor for the first time. So here is a dialog window which presents us with the option to open existing projects or create a new one. Of course, we don't have any projects yet because the game engine doesn't exist yet. So the first option that we are going to use is the create project. But suppose we at some point have game projects, then here would be a list of all the projects that we are working on, and there is an icon next to it and the name of the project and a screenshot of the last view that you had when you were working on that project, and the two buttons to open or exit. And the same thing is for creating a project. We are presented with a list of templates that we can choose from. So we can have an empty project or a first person or a top-down real-time strategy kind of template that we can choose from. And the same as open project, we have an icon and the name of the template and a template picture that signifies what is in the template, right? And of course we can give the new project a name and a location to be created and the buttons to create and exit the application. Let's start by adding a new folder here, game project, and I'll put here everything that is related to the game project. So the first thing I'll create is a window for browsing the project. I don't want this window to be resizable, so resize mode is no resize. Let's make this smaller. And window location or startup location is the center of the screen. And I'll do the same for the main window. I'll give this the title Primal Editor. And Windows startup location is also the center screen. The first things I want to put here are the two buttons that I can use to pick from opening a project or creating a new project. I need a grid here with 2 rows. And the height of this row is automatically determined from what we put in that row. And the second row is just a default height. So in the first row, I'll put 2 buttons. I'll use a stack panel for this. With the horizontal orientation, and I'll use toggle buttons to have our open project or new project buttons. So this one is open project, and its name is open project button. And I'll have one more with new project. Now these buttons are quite small now, so I'm going to give them a larger font size. And I'm going to put a little distance between the two. And of course I want them to be centered. So I'll center the whole stack panel and give it a little margin as well. Next, I want here to have my controls for opening a project or creating new project. I'll, by the way, change this to create a project to be a bit more descriptive. So another stack panel. The thing I want to do is to have these two controls next to each other for opening a project and creating a project. And depending on what button I have selected, this whole stack panel will be shifted to the left or right to make either open project control visible or create project control visible. So for example, I can have here a border with a width of 800 and blue background, for example, light blue. And of course I want this to be on the second row of the grid. Okay. So this blue background represents the control for the open project. So it's basically this one. What we see here on the underneath these buttons, this is what is now blue. And the create part will be next to it. And whenever we select create project button, it will be shifted to the left. So we see this part. And when we go back to the open project, it will be shifted to the right. So we can see the open project. So I'll have here a text block with a big font size that says open project. And I'll have another one that says create project. And it's green. So if you look at this, we see that this border is now next to this part, and I can now take this stack panel as a whole, and if I would shift it by 800 to the left, which is minus 800 pixels, then you will see that create project is now visible. So that's the way I want to shift between the two controls, basically. Okay, let's test this. Now we see the main window, but we of course don't open this dialog window yet. So that's what I'm going to do here in the main window. So I can go here and create a function that is called whenever the window is loaded. Here I'll detach this handler again, because we only load this window once and this shouldn't happen multiple times anyway. And we'll have another function to open the project browser dialog. Here I create an instance of the project browser. Whenever I open a dialog window, basically in WPF, so in this case it's the project browser, well, it inherits from Windows. So if we want to open it as a window, we just call show this function, and this will be like an independent child window. But I want this to be a dialog, so we have to first, let's rename this because I see there is a typo here. Okay, so I want this to be a dialog, so I can't go back to the main window, and for that we have another function which is show dialog. And show dialog returns a nullable Boolean value that can be, well, null, false, or true. And whenever this value is false, I want to just close the application because the user apparently clicked the exit button. So here is the application, current, and shutdown. Otherwise, I would like to open the project. We haven't got any data module for the game project yet, so I'll leave this empty for now. But this should now cause the project browser dialog to open whenever the editor is started. So let's see if that happens. Okay, so now we have this project browser dialog opened every time we start a Frummel editor. And these buttons, of course, don't do anything yet. And we see that there is we can go back to this main window as long as we are in the dialog window, so that's good. Next, I want to write the logics for these buttons. So here I'll give them an event handler for when the user clicks on either of them. He'll check which one was clicked. So I'll compare the sender to, for example, open project button. So if that button was clicked, I'll check if we are coming from the create project control or we already were in open project control. So if we are already here in open project and we click open project again, nothing should happen. Open project should stay selected and we should stay here. Otherwise, if we click on create project button, then this whole thing should shift to the left and this green control should be visible then. And the same should happen in the reverse order when we are in the create project control. So I'm going to implement that now. So if we come from the create button, let's see if I have the correct name for this. This is the new project button. It should be create. So create project button. If that one is checked, that means that we were in create mode and we are coming back to open project mode. So open project button should be checked. Well, it should stay checked anyway because even if we already were in open project mode, then nothing should happen, so it should stay checked. But if we came back from create project button, then this button should be unchecked. And this stack panel should shift to the left. So I'm going to give this stack panel also a name. So this browser content, I'll set its margin to 0 because, well, we were in create button mode, so it was already shifted to the left. Now we are going back to the right. So this whole thing happens for the create button as well. So if the sender wasn't open project button, well, it should then be the create project button. So if we came from open project button, if it was checked, then it should get unchecked. And we should go to -800 pixels. And otherwise, if we were already in the create project mode, then we should just, nothing should happen, right? So let's check this. Now, if I'm in open project, then nothing happens, and then create project will shift these controls to the left. So I now see the create project control, and if I click once more on create project, nothing happens, of course, and I can go back to open project. So this works. And one thing I noticed is that when I start this editor, none of these buttons are selected while we are in open project. So I want this open project button to be selected on default, and the other one unchecked. Now the open project button is selected on default. That's good. I'll change the title for this as well, just project browser. And the next thing I want to do is to implement these open project and create project controls according to our design. This is our design, and I'm going to create these controls now for the open project and the create project. So I'll add 2 more controls here, a user control for the new project, and one for open project. Okay, in the open project control, I would have a stack panel, and in there I have another stack panel for the list of project templates and the screenshot. And next to it will be a border that holds this picture of the template. And of course, I want this stack panel to be centered horizontally. Underneath, I want another stack panel. I'll give this stack panel a background of white so we can see everything that I put here. I'll also have a button to browse and select a location instead of typing the path. And the last thing I would like to add is the 2 buttons to create the project or exit this window. One more thing I can do is to make this create button the default button, so we don't have to click on it explicitly. We just, if we hit enter button, then it's like clicking on this button. It's default. I can set it to true. And for the exit button, I can set is cancelled to true. That means that whenever user hits escape, then it's the same as clicking this button. So we don't have to click it explicitly. So in the project dialog, I'll replace these borders with the correct controls that we just created. So first is the open project control, and the other one is the new project control. Okay, the reason that it's not displayed correctly is that I haven't given these either of these controls a definite width. So I can go here and tell the control that it's 800 pixels wide, and the same for open project. And now when I run the editor, we have the correct behavior. This window is not high enough to contain everything in the create project. So I can go back here and make it a bit higher. For the open project, I just want to copy paste everything because they are very similar to each other. And just put everything here. And the only thing that's different is that we don't have this name and path fields because, well, we already have the project. So these should go. And of course, this should be open. And we are done. Okay, so now we are in open project, and then when I click on create project, we have the other control. These buttons don't work, of course, yet, but the exit button works. Okay, I think this would be a good place to wrap up for today, and next time I'll try and create the logic behind creating a new project and opening existing one. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you join me on Patreon, you'll get access to the code on GitHub, so you don't have to type everything over from the video. Plus, there are also other nice goodies and rewards exclusive to my Patreon supporters. Please use the link in the video description to check them out. I hope to see you next time. Until then, take care and happy game engineering.